Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to another exciting episode of the Cohesity View. I got with me today, I've got Patrick Redknapp, one of our EMEA counterparts and purveyor of a English accent. So just in case you wanted to have one of those on your show, just let us know. We'll offer Patrick for a fee. At the same time, I've got Teresa Miller, who's recently been promoted and now manages all of us, I should state. So she gets the task of running this particular circus from this point on. So we like to take this show and talk about some recent tech topics and just basically talk through the different topics and get our various degree of opinions on those particular topics that we're bringing forth. So, folks, I need to bring up a very important topic: patching. Log4j. Log4j brought us a wonderful exercise in reactionary patching when a major vulnerability happens out there in the field. And in this particular case, it not just impacted what we consider PC servers, it impacted a lot more than that, a lot more of different devices that could potentially run Java out there. So what are some of the feelings that everybody has of reactionary patching? I know from my perspective, I've been spending way too much time in our lab trying to get everything patched up and ready to go to ensure that we're not having these vulnerabilities be huge gaping holes for folks to walk right through and take advantage of my data.
Yeah, so that's a topic that can be very painful for enterprises. So I've spent a lot of years where I was doing that practitioner side, managing the patching. We loved the controlled time period, right? Monthly patches, follow the Microsoft Patch Tuesday, or a couple weeks following, depending on the strategy we were using, so that we could test first. And anytime there was an out-of-band patch, it's not something we took lightly. Like any kind of decision to put forth potential downtime to the environment had to really be scrutinized and taken really up the chain to leadership for even approval, just because of the downtime. Now, John, you've owned the log 4J patching for customer zero. Is this one of those downtime type patches, or once in a while we get one of those where you can just kind of run it and you're golden? Was this that painful for enterprises?
Oh, for sure, because in most particular cases, you have to take down critical services to make sure that that patch was able to update appropriately for any of the particular services. I mean, when we walk through the customer zero environment, just the VMware stack alone, from the servers down to the individual software layers, there was multitudes of different reboots and server cyclings and service cyclings that we had to do to ensure that those patches stuck and were still there the next time any sort of device had to go through a reboot or any other related patches for normal operation.
So extremely painful. And what about the risk reward? So what was the risk that, admins at enterprises that are listening to this now that haven't remediated the log4j? What's the risk of not having done that remediation yet?
Well, what the risk running that you have is there's now new exploits that are looking specifically for these vulnerabilities, and they're using those to gain advantage to systems and compromise those particular systems, whether it's to deliver malware, deliver ransomware, whether it's to just get access to environments in question. I mean, one of the things that I'm still working through at the time of this recording is to ensure that our Horizon environment doesn't have gaping holes from an outside world perspective. So because we do have external access, I have to make sure that the external access isn't compromised by somebody just poking through and looking for that particular vulnerability to exploit.
Yeah, so it seems like if organizations haven't done this patching yet, they should be looking to do that out of band update or add it to their regular patching window at this point and get it taken care of. It sounds like the gaping hole that it leaves behind is really a security vulnerability you don't want hanging out there.
I don't think you do. I think that some organisations will struggle more with it than others, in particular, to fill that hole. I think because there are some organisations, they've got everything locked down and they've got their playbook written out and they're going to patch that hole. But there's always that some organisations, and sometimes it's local government, sometimes it's small organisations, big organisations. They've got that "don't touch it" box, the thing that everyone's afraid of breaking, of patching. And this is something which isn't going to go away because, like we said with Log4j, basically it was anything with Java, wasn't it? I think that was what we were discussing just right beforehand. Was literally anything is going to get done. So if you've got an old box that is working and no one wants you to touch it because no one knows how to patch it without taking everything down, you're going to have that problem.
Yeah, and I would state that basically from our this perspective of this reactionary patching, this is just the beginning, because we know that more vulnerabilities are going to end up being discovered out there with a lot of these libraries that are common across multitudes of different devices that are out there. So we have to fully expect that this is one of the first times that we've had a major patch impact this wide swath of devices. In the past, we could say Microsoft has a very important patch for Microsoft devices, or you're going to get a Linux library update for a bunch of Linux machines that may be running a particular package that's out there. But we are talking about here is basically a lot of devices that were Java capable that were running this particular package that we now have to figure out, how do you patch a ATM? How do you patch even if it comes down to something like a dispenser system, like whether it's a soda machine or even like an example would be just any sort of dispenser machine at that particular point. They all could be running Java behind the scenes, and they all could be impacted by this. Now, granted, maybe you wouldn't want to hack a soda machine, but it's something that you do have to worry about because it has monetary impacts because of its function that it serves. So it's a varying degree of what you need to patch, but now we're getting to the point where we have to worry about patching devices that we didn't even think we'd have to actually patch in our regular rotation.
I think it's interesting because I think the scenario we're talking about mostly is on-prem, although don't get me wrong, if you're deploying like servers into a cloud platform, you're still responsible for that patching. But we could potentially be making a case for SaaS. I don't know if there's a SaaS app for dispensing soda, but when we consider whether or not we even want to be in the business as organizations and enterprises of managing patches, it does make that SaaS topic a little bit more compelling.
True, because at that particular point, it's all about the ownership and who owns the particular application at that point. So it would make sense that SaaS operators would have the onus to have to ensure that the patches are up to date, and the consumers would just have to worry about still just consuming the application at that point.
Yeah.
It takes the delivery question out of it, because you know how you're going to get at your system. You know where you're going to get at it to patch it. You just basically it takes that question mark out of it, because, like I said, if you've got an ATM that's independent, how are you going to get there to patch it? You might have to physically go in, or you might have to get at it another way, and that's very much the problem. You can't go to a soda machine unless it's connected to the internet, which is highly unlikely. So the actual physical getting to the device to patch it itself. If you're using SaaS, it's kind of taken it out of the equation.
All right. Well, I think we've kind of beaten the Log4j patching to death, even though most of us have gone through and been almost beaten to death by the patching process. So I think it's up to a new topic. Teresa, I think you've got something related to autonomous vehicles you'd like to discuss.
Yeah, well, it's the whole topic of automation. And John, I know you're no stranger to automation. I've personally done plenty of PowerShell automation. And where automation is going, specifically, I wanted to talk about automation of cars. Tesla has spent some time on this, and they were recently in the news because somebody who purchased a Tesla decided that autopilot was good enough for them to sit back and watch a movie while the car drove. So when the human life is on the other side of it, is automation key? Is it a good thing? Or if you actually do some research on this, I guess the other question that comes to mind for me is, Tesla will say, well, this isn't, the autopilot's not considered a full self-driving vehicle. So maybe the automation behind this was mistaken and misunderstood, right, by the consumer. So I'm just curious to get some feedback from both of you on this topic. Is this automation at its best, worse, or are we doing the right thing by automating vehicles? What are your thoughts?
I think that it's a tool, and they do describe it as a tool. They don't say you should replace driving with the automated driving feature. I think very much. I think a lot of people are probably guilty of letting it just drive, but I think you still got to keep your attention on the road at the end of the day, because there's always got to be that human factor in driving itself. Otherwise, there's that situation where only a human can make the decision to take control. And I think they're very much saying that as well. Would you get on an aeroplane which is has autopilot, or would you prefer a pilot sitting in the seat just in case? It's like that.
Yeah, I want both. I think airplane pilots use autopilot, but they're still sitting there to take over, and they have a co-pilot to top it off, right? They're not going to just go to sleep or watch a movie and not pay attention. At least I hope
not. Yeah, I hope not.
No, I would think that, we as human beings sometimes will get lazy with the systems that we put in place around us. And in this particular case, it sounds like the person who decided to sit back and watch a movie, AI and ML to some degree aren't a full replacement for the human thought process. They're not. They're tools to add to be able to see a few things that maybe we're not able to see with our human processes at that point. So, to be able to see, are we drifting out of lanes? Do we need a jolt to let us know that we're falling asleep? Things like that. Those are an advantage for folks behind the wheel for a safety feature. But to totally depend upon, the machine to do the job for us, driving is one of those particular tasks. It's a human-oriented task. You're never going to replace driving from a human perspective with a machine at that point, and until everybody is using a machine to be able to automate the system.
Yes, it's infrastructure that's going to be the key thing with here. If you had a automated driving lane only, which was completely shielded off, then you could probably get away with to say, right, you can use this lane and put the automatic pilot on, and that's it, because that's kind of a segregated system that's shielded off from the rest of the road. So you're going to only have the automated driving in that area. And I think that, like you said, unless everyone's using it, or unless there's a specific area which is going to be isolated from the rest of the traffic, you're still going to have that element of the X factor in there, which is just going to throw a proverbial spanner in the works always.
So I also think it's interesting if we take this example and just correlate it to the enterprise. Automation can be fantastic, but automation, even by way of managing our backend infrastructure, is not always perfect either. So I guess my key takeaway on this is that automation is great, but it's not one size fits all. And so if you can just take that and correlate that back to even your business practices, you may need to reevaluate how you're leveraging automation and use it selectively where it fits best.
Yeah, I've always gone with the principle when automating back end systems that there's about 80% of the work that can be done repeated for most of the processes and the tasks that you're trying to automate. It's the 20% that you're going to spend a lot of time trying to fix and make the nuances that are necessary for the little changes that you need to make for everything out there. So I'd say you can get a good majority of things, but you're not going to be able to get everything 100% automated the way you want unless you've decided that you're going to throw out basically all those basically differences at that point. You're going to build one thing one way, and that's the only way you're going to build it. All right. Well, from automation, Patrick,
Yeah.
let's talk the metaverse.
Okay, yeah. I mean, this is kind of a nice segue going from automation, because we're going to go into a different type of automation this week. Mark Zuckerberg, who's fully in on the metaverse. He's renamed Facebook Meta, or Meta, or however you want to pronounce it. He's renamed that, and he basically unlocked a bit of a demo where he kind of built a beach using an AI builder bot, and so it was kind of like he used a universal speech translator with an AI assistant to build that. Now, that is a very powerful tool, and recently this week, in fact, I did a bit of a VR session with some IT community members as well, and it worked out really well. But the thing is, the way it's kind of like you can automate certain processes in the metaverse. I'm thinking real world application for driving business uses in the future. I mean, what kind of business uses would there be for this? Is it just going to be for building tools or interaction, or is there going to be so much more? I mean, Mark Zuckerberg's obviously very kind of bullish on this, but it's all going to be driven by AI and automation at the end of the day. So where could it take us?
So I have a little bit of a pessimistic thought to the metaverse. I think that the last couple of years with the pandemic have taught us that you cannot replace human interaction. And while AI and the metaverse behind it is simulating that, and the virtual reality activity that you had done this week, Patrick, was cool. Can it? I just don't see how it can replace our need for people and that interaction and feeling their presence.
No, and I've read I kind of agree with you on that, Teresa. There's documented human interaction studies out there that have basically have stated for the most part that you need to necessarily, for your communities, you need to be in the physical presence of those particular folks to really feel the right chemicals within your brain at that particular point to be able to take full benefit of what being involved with human interaction is supposed to involve. You can honestly tell I've been reading a lot of Simon Sinek again, and he's been talking about the difference between getting a dopamine hit versus oxytocin versus some of the other human responses that we have in our brains when we go through positive and negative experiences within our life. So I'm not sure that you're going to be able to properly get those particular experiences inside of the metaverse, but it doesn't mean that there won't be some business applications that may be able to be drummed up because of this. I mean, we've seen, because of the pandemic, the need to be able to interact with somebody, whether it's remote or with telepresence or in other fashion, for things like doctor care, or at least just to be able to have a therapist session in that regard.
I think that it's definitely driving technological advancement in certain areas, particularly, like AI, machine learning, and applications like that. As far as how you were talking about the dopamine hit that you kind of get when you're with people, or replacing the human interaction, I certainly think on some level it's very much the same as if you're playing a computer game with people online, because you are. Excuse me. Yeah, but basically, if you're playing a computer game online, you sometimes get that rush of adrenaline, or it's not simulating a human interaction; it's more simulating an experience that you're enjoying. And I say that's the difference. But you've certainly got this technology that's underpinning the whole thing, and developing that further for business use is where it's going to be interesting. Whether or not you're actually going to replace it, replace certain tools, or it's going to help expand our set of tools rather than replace them, I think.
So you think it's meant to complement, not replace, human interaction, is what you're saying?
Yeah, I should hope so. I would think that it's going to end up being one of the tools in our array of tools that we have. So just like you might jump on like a video call to speak to someone, you might say, okay, well, let's get into this, and you can go into put your headset on and go into like a whiteboarding room where you can actually physically whiteboard something, or even draw 3D structures that help represent what you're trying to communicate and stuff like that.
So it's kind of interesting. I think the jury's out. We'll kind of watch and see how that transforms, and how they propose we integrate it into our lifestyles.
Well, if there's anything that I can already tell you, the idea of wearing a VR headset, especially with the person who's got glasses at this point. The last time I tried to wear a VR headset and play a VR game, I almost got physically sick trying to operate within that 3D world, because maybe it was motion sickness, maybe it was something else. So it could be that while it's there, it may still not physically be there for everybody. You may still have physical problems trying to access the metaverse at that point.
Yeah, I'd say that there's definitely obstacles to be overcome, but I think the jury's still out on it for a lot of people. Some people are more into it than others. I've been an early adopter on it, so I'm quite keen on it. But at the end of the day, it's got to serve a bit. If you're going to use it for business, it's got to serve a business purpose. It's got to it's got to be an extra feather in your cap that's doing something effective, and it can't just be a piece of bling that you stick in the background. It's got to have utility, and I think that's where if it's going to last the distance, that's where it's going to have to shine. It's going to have some actual use case that most businesses are going to use across the board.
All right. Well, with that, I think we'll wrap up this particular episode of the Cohesity View. I think for the most part, is everybody's got a good idea. It's been a while since we've done an episode, so it's nice to get one out. I know from our perspective, it's been tough to try to schedule, but we've been able to finally lock a few folks down and get some interesting topics. So pay attention to this particular space. Subscribe to the YouTube channel that the Cohesity View is a part of, and look forward to more episodes in the future. So everybody, thank everybody who's watching. Thank you, folks.